Hi there BookTube, it's Eleanor here, and today I want to talk to you about some books that I was either gifted or bought for myself or was sent from the publishers. Let's get stuck in. So the first one is called Diversify and it's by June Sarpong. June Sarpong is a TV presenter. If you live in the UK, you've probably heard of her. I'm not sure if you're out of the UK whether you might have done or not, but she has a lot of different things under her belt. She has an MBE. And she has worked in the television industry for 20 years. She's hosted a wealth of events, including Make Poverty History in London's Trafalgar Square, Nelson Mandela's 90th birthday celebrations, and she worked extensively for Prince Charles for 10 years as an ambassador for the Prince's Trust, along with lots of other things. And she's written this book called Diversify, a handbook for these troubled times. Diversify puts the spotlight on those marginalised groups that are often not heard of, including women, ethnic minorities, those living with disabilities and the LGBTQIA+ community. This includes case studies and information from Oxford University and 6 revolutionary steps to help you overcome unconscious bias, which is something that I've become more aware of in the more recent times, this idea of unconscious bias, and it's one that I really want to find out more about. The next book I want to talk about was one that I heard the author read a portion of their book and also talk about it at a Christmas event, and this is Walker Books publishers, and this book is called Blood Moon by Lucy Cuthew, and this just sounded amazing. Now, I have a really tricky path with books written in verse, and so it is with some trepidation that I often go into them. They never end up being quite as good as I want them to be, but I'm willing to take the risk on this one because Blood Moon is talking about periods. I love this tampon style bookmark that came with my proof copy. The book is coming out on the 2nd of July, and this is what the front cover will look like when it comes out. So this is talking about shaming. Frankie has her first sexual experience. It's one that is healthy and normal and everything that she wanted it to be, but she gets her period during it. Her and the boy Benjamin that she's having sex with both agree that it's just natural, but somehow a meme goes viral making fun of her and starts to make her feel ashamed of what's happened. And then this online shaming starts to take a very real and scary consequence, and Frankie starts to think that maybe her real life might be over. I think this is going to be really hard hitting and really just get us talking. Period, period, period. There's nothing shameful in it. In fact, a period is a wonderful thing. I mean, it's bloody annoying, and it makes me, in fact mine came on today, so I'm quite grumpy, and I can tell I'm grumpy and I got a killer of a tummy ache, but it's natural and it's not something to be ashamed of. And I try very consciously, actually, when I'm in my school, I work with children of 10 and up, so I'm in the upper years of the primary sector, and we do talk about periods towards the end of their year 5 journey, and some of them have even started their periods at age 10, some as early as 9, but 10, some of them are starting to have their periods, and you know, I don't want them to feel ashamed of it. I don't want them to feel embarrassed if they need to go to the toilet. You know, I find myself tucking my tampon up my sleeve as I go off to the toilets to change it at school. And, you know, there is some decency in that because it's a school, but you know, we shouldn't be ashamed of periods. They're a natural part of life. They're something we can't do without if we want to have babies. And even if we don't, well, it's a shame if we don't want to have babies. I feel sorry for you, not because you don't want to have a child, because that is everyone's own right, but in terms of having to put up with the period. But it's certainly nothing to be ashamed of, and so I think this is going to be a really good jumping point for people to start talking more, especially teenagers, about periods. This next one is one that actually I'd pre-ordered, and then I was very kindly offered it by the publisher, and I thought, yes please, I want to read it even sooner. It's by our very own booktuber George Lester, and it's called Boy Queen. I love the the look of this proof copy. It's shiny and amazing, and it's about drag queens. So this is about a young boy. While all his friends are heading off to university, he's come up with a load of rejection letters from drama school. He doesn't really know what to do now. His boyfriend won't acknowledge him in real life, and he's just struggling. And so I think it's going to lead him along the path of being a drag queen and discovering drag, and I'm really excited for this one. I'm all about the drag scene and the empowerment that it can bring. I just think it sounds brilliant. The next book is a Picador proof, and it is You Will Never Be Forgotten by Mary South. This is a collection of short stories, which isn't something I naturally gravitate towards, but I think the premise of this sounds really interesting. It says an architect draws questionable inspiration from her daughter's birth defect. A content moderator for the world's biggest search engine, who spends her days culling videos of beheadings and suicides, turns from stalking her rapist online to following him in real life. At a camp for recovering internet trolls, a sensitive misfit goes missing. A wounded mother raises the second incarnation of her child. You Will Never Be Forgotten, Mary South explores how technology can both collapse our relationships from within and provide opportunities for genuine connection. Formally inventive, darkly absurdist, savagely critical of the increasingly fraught cultural climates we inhabit, these 10 stories also find hope in fleeting interactions and moments of tenderness. So I'm hoping that I'll give this a go and maybe enjoy well, it'd be nice to enjoy all of them, wouldn't it? But at least enjoy some of them if some of them don't work for me. The next book is a graphic novel. I picked it up because I saw it on someone's channel recently, and that is Skyward Volume 1. I love graphic novels. I love the look of the colour palette in this one, and it just sounds like a rip-roaring adventure. In this we have a black main character, which is really refreshing and lovely to see. There is not enough graphic novels out there with black main characters, and it's set in a world where a fraction of gravity has disappeared, so people can now fly. However, there's this real possibility that if you jump too high you could go shooting off of Earth, and I think our main character, I think her name is Willa, discovers that there is some more sort of sinister things at play, and there's a few volumes I think of this out now, and I'm certainly looking forward to giving it a go. For our book swap this month, the lovely Janet from Swirly Girly Reads sent me Jill Shalvis's Lost and Found Sisters. I love Jill Shalvis. She sort of gobbled me up. I've got out of the habit of reading her books. I read the Lucky Harbour series like literally like that. I think I read like most of them in a month. They were just so they were just so homely and like reading a little sort of nugget of home and romance and a little bit of snark in there, and I just loved it, and I'm hoping that this one will be a great series too. I think this could be a really good one to read this summer. It's about a woman, I think she's a sous chef, I think she's living in LA, and something happens and she inherits, and she has to go back to home on the California coast, but she doesn't inherit sort of money or property. I think she inherits something else, which sort of makes her question her whole family dynamics, and yeah, I just think this sounds really brilliant. I'm currently reading a book called Solitaire by Albert Woodfox for the BookTube Prize. It's one of our non-fiction books, and it's about Albert, well, it's non-fiction, so it's about Albert's time in prison and being wrongly convicted, and it's really interesting, and I find myself fascinated with the prison system. And I was recently watching Jean from Jean's Bookish Thoughts video, and she talked about this: inside this place, not of it, narratives from women's prisons, and this is edited by Robin Levy and Aylett Waldman. I'm currently also engrossing myself in all sorts of prison documentaries. I just find it a fascinating idea, prisons, and just the abuse of power in prisons is just atrocious, and just the prison system in general I'm more interested in finding out, and I think definitely women's prisons is something that I'd like to know more about. Something that I was quite involved with my job before I had Matilda was actually going into prisons and educating prisoners, and I went in and I had to learn, you know, how to handle myself in prison situations, and it was a really interesting and eye-opening thing to do, and I've always found myself fascinated with you know, what can be done to help rehabilitate prisoners. This one looks at women's prisons in the US, and it's looking at human rights violations which many women face. It says here, in their own words, 13 narrators recount their lives leading up to incarceration and their harrowing struggle for survival once inside. So I'm really looking forward to reading this one and just finding out a little bit more about what being in prison is like for women in the United States. Me and Matilda have been doing some history recently, and we watched a thing on Mary Seacole and we found out a lot more about her. Mary Seacole isn't someone that I knew anything about before going into this. It was through doing the homeschooling with her that I found out more about Mary Seacole, someone I didn't know anything about, and someone actually, from hearing about it, I think is has much more to say and there's much more interesting than Florence Nightingale, who was also doing a similar thing at the time. Mary Seacole was brought up in Jamaica. I believe her father was Scottish and her mother was Jamaican, and they looked after soldiers who were out there during the war, and they cared for them, and her mother taught her how to do that. And then during the Crimean War, she wanted to go and help in the Crimean War, and so she went over to England to try and join Florence Nightingale's nurses to go out to Crimea and help, and she was refused, and the implication is that it was because she was black. And so, not giving up, Mary Seacole paid her own way over to the Crimea and set up what she called the British Hotel, which was actually sort of a nursing hotel. It was a place where wounded soldiers could be, where they were fed and cared for and nursed back to health. And she did so much for the people out there. And when she came back, I think she was thoroughly neglected for quite a long time and had no money. All her money had been spent. She wasn't able to sell the British Hotel at the end of the war, and I just think her story is fascinating. And during this BBC bite-sized lesson, they talked about a book that Mary had actually written, and I said to Matilda, wouldn't it be strange if that, well, it has to be true, but I wonder if it's still available. Well, it is, and it's called Wonderful Adventures of Mrs. Seacole in Many Lands, and it's by Mary Seacole, and this is a Penguin Classics, so I can't wait. This is all about that story I just told you, but in more detail, and I am fascinated by this, and I cannot wait to read it and discuss it with Matilda as I go along. The next book I think you'd have to have been, you know, under a rock not to have heard about, and that is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. I tried to avoid getting this one. Again, it sounds like it's more sort of short stories intertwined. I don't do well with short stories, but it is undeniable how much people are raving about this book. And I just think if enough people are buzzing about it, enough people are raving about it from all different types of genre-loving channels, I think it's one that is worth giving some time to. It's the winner of the Booker Prize 2019. And it's shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction 2020. This says that it is 12 different characters on an intertwined journey of discovery. It's future, past, fiction and history, and a novel about who we are now. I'm gonna try it and see what I think. The next one I have not much of an idea about. It's called If I Can't Have You by Charlotte Levin. This is a hardback. It's been blurbed one of the best books I've ever read by Ruth Jones, who is the co-writer of Gavin and Stacey, who also writes books actually that my mum loves. I think they're sort of grown-up romances or contemporary women's fiction, so that's one to look out for if you like that type of book, Ruth Jones. But this in the blurb says, Samuel, the day we met I knew I'd finally found what I'd been looking for. You. Happiness at last. Then you left me and now I'm alone. Everyone I love leaves in the end, but not this time. I'm not giving up on us. I'm not giving up on you. When you love someone, you never let go. That's why for me, this is just the beginning. It sounds creepy and stalkery, and I can't wait. So that's some of the books that I have either received from publishers or kind friends or bought for myself. Have you read any of these? What do you think of these? Let me know in the comments down below. Is there any that you really want me to get to sooner rather than later so that I can review them on the channel? Let me know in the comments down below. Let's chat as always, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye for now, BookTube.